Mirror Talk, The Language of the Nervous System, Episode 6, Word Wounds. When language leaves a scar, welcome back to Mirror Talk, The Language of the Nervous System, a space where we listen beyond the literal, where words are not just sounds, but states of being, reflexes of survival, and reflections of everything we've been taught to feel. If you've been walking with me through this journey, from the first word, where language became safety, to lost in translation, where meaning fractured under mismatched states, today we turn our gaze to something even deeper. The imprint of language itself, the words that didn't just pass through us, but stayed. This is an episode about the phrases that built our reflexes, the corrections that carved our confidence, the tones that taught our tongues what was safe to say and what wasn't. We call them word wounds because sometimes the body remembers a sentence longer than a scar. Every time we hear a word, the nervous system responds before we do. It scans tone, texture, rhythm, asking, is this safe? Long before it wonders, what does this mean? When tone and touch misalign, when love speaks in threat, or care arrives as criticism, the body learns to translate language, not through meaning, but through memory. We don't just listen with our ears. We listen with pulse, posture, and breath. This is where the nervous system language, NSL, framework begins, recognizing that communication is first physiological, then philosophical, tone before text, safety before syntax. The mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, expands on this. Meaning is not contained in words alone, but co-created in the field of reflection between two nervous systems. Every sentence is a mirror. What we hear is shaped by who we became when we first learned to listen. When we were children, language didn't just describe reality, it defined it. Good girl. Don't talk back, you're too much. Each phrase became a micro-spell, etching invisible lines around who we were allowed to be. And because children are somatic learners, those lines weren't just drawn in thought, they were drawn in muscle. A word like lazy lands not in logic, but in the body, a tightening in the chest, a drop in the stomach, a reflex that whispers, move faster or love will leave. This is how language becomes physiology. Through repetition and charge, words become states, states become scripts, and scripts become selves. Science now confirms what ancient linguists, mystics, and poets intuited, that most of our responses are not born in consciousness. Roughly 95% of our cognitive activity occurs below awareness. The subconscious isn't some mystical underworld. It's a networked intelligence, a symphony of neural shortcuts, processing millions of signals per second, pattern matching new experiences to old emotional templates. When someone raises their voice, your amygdala doesn't ask why. It asks when. When have I heard this tone before? Was I safe then? This is implicit memory, the emotional residue of experience replayed through reflex. Before the cortex can reason, the body has already chosen: fight, flee, freeze, or fawn. And so, when language arrives, even gentle words wrapped in harsh tone, or calm tone carrying a cruel message, the subconscious evaluates not content but felt familiarity. We don't hear what's said, we hear what we've survived. A trigger isn't a sign of weakness, it's a memory in motion. When a familiar phrase lands, what's wrong with you? The subconscious body recognizes the rhythm of rejection. Neurons that fire together once fire together again. The stomach clenches, breath shortens, feedback might trigger shame rather than curiosity. The nervous system doesn't evaluate fairness, it retrieves familiarity. Over time, this becomes what we call a hard-coded response, a habitual reaction so rehearsed it bypasses conscious thought. We snap back, shut down, apologize excessively, or withdraw, not because we choose to, but because our synapses have memorized the sequence. This same mechanism fuels the online echo chambers we observe. When our subconscious favors familiarity over friction, we gravitate toward narratives that confirm our emotional set point. Someone conditioned to equate disagreement with danger will scroll until they find something that affirms their view. Someone who associates authority with truth will accept confident tones as evidence. The body decides the algorithm long before the algorithm decides the feed. The collapse of discourse. In this state, conversation becomes a collision. Online, where vocal tone and facial cues are absent, our nervous systems fill in the gaps with projection. A simple disagreement can feel like an attack. Uncertainty feels like chaos. New information feels like a threat. This is why certain trigger phrases dominate digital debate. You're crazy. Do your research. You're a conspiracy theorist. These aren't arguments, they're nervous system shutdowns. They signal a collapse from curiosity to defense. Once arousal crosses a threshold, syntax follows, sentences shorten, nuance vanishes, empathy contracts. The conversation isn't ending because logic failed. It's ending because regulation did. The subconscious, craving stability, clings to certainty. And certainty, in language, often takes the form of dismissal. In a dysregulated world, to label is to feel safe, even if the label blinds us to truth. The body as interpreter, according to polyvagal theory, Porges, 2011. The vagus nerve connects the brainstem to the heart, lungs, and gut, continually scanning for cues of safety or danger, not just in the environment, but in interaction. It listens to tone, tempo, and rhythm, translating language into a state. This means your body doesn't wait for meaning. It reads music first. Harsh tone danger. Gentle tone seeker. This applies equally to written language, where punctuation, capitalization, and pace act as prosody. A text written in all caps is read as shouting or aggression, even in silence. The body reacts to the implied rhythm of words. When the nervous system is harmonized, tone lands as information. When it's dysregulated, tone lands as a threat. The same sentence, "we need to talk," can trigger anticipation or dread, depending on the listener's history. This is where NSL, nervous system language, becomes essential, developing awareness of not only what we say, but how our state speaks through us. Words mirror physiology. Regulated bodies phrase differently. Safety has syntax. Mirror linguistic hypothesis in action from the MLH perspective. Communication is an act of reflection. Every word spoken or typed not only conveys meaning but reveals the state from which it emerged. You never listen might be less accusation and more confession, an echo of one's own unheard voice. You're too sensitive often mirrors emotional repression. In miscommunication, we are not merely exchanging sentences, we are trading states. The dialogue becomes a hall of mirrors, your nervous system reading mine, both seeking safety in recognition. The problem arises when these reflections are distorted by unprocessed emotion. The wounded child inside the adult hijacks the lexicon. Healing begins when we learn to pause between impulse and expression, letting awareness translate reactivity into response. Practice. Aligning body and brain to soften hard-coded responses, we must relink perception with presence. This practice trains the prefrontal cortex to stay online when the body begins to brace, merging awareness with action. Practice. The grounded pause 1. Notice. When a word or tone triggers a reaction, locate it. Is it heat in the chest? Tightness in the jaw? 2. Name. Say internally, "My body is responding." Avoid stories. Stay sensory. 3. Breathe. Inhale slowly through the nose for 4 counts. Exhale through the mouth for 6. 4. Anchor. Feel the soles of your feet or the weight of your seat. Let gravity reassert its presence. 5. Rephrase. Once grounded, revisit the stimulus. Ask, "What else could this mean?" This realignment activates the ventral vagal state, the branch of the nervous system linked with social engagement and empathy. When breath and awareness co-regulate, curiosity reopens. The mind no longer races ahead of the body, they move as one. The grammar of safety word wounds remind us that language isn't neutral, it's nervous. Every syllable carries a signature of state, every phrase a fingerprint of experience. To heal, we don't just change vocabulary, we change the physiology that speaks it. Becoming conscious of subconscious speech is not about censorship but compassion. When we slow down enough to feel the body's interpretation before we craft a reply, we turn reaction into relationship. The next time a word lands heavily, ask not only, "What does this mean?" but "Where does this live in me?" Because meaning begins where memory breathes, and memory, like language, is always looking for a way to be heard. Scripts of shame, the grammar of self-doubt, how correction becomes narration. The words that wound us most deeply are not always shouted. Sometimes they arrive softly, shaped as guidance, hidden in praise, or disguised as reason. They echo in lessons, in feedback, in casual remarks, and over time, they form the latticework of how we hear ourselves. The language that first corrected us often becomes the language that narrates us. Childhood is where syntax and self intertwine. We didn't simply learn to speak, we learned how to be spoken to. Before we could choose our words, we absorbed theirs. Each command, comparison, or sigh of disappointment became part of an internal script. We learned which tones earned safety, each repetition deepens the groove, like footsteps carving a path through grass. Eventually, the mind no longer questions direction. It follows the path automatically. This is how heuristics, those cognitive shortcuts discussed earlier, become emotional traps. A child repeatedly told, "Don't be dramatic," learns to equate visibility with danger. As an adult, that person will self-edit before expressing need, anticipating judgment before it arrives. The body tenses at the threshold of authenticity. The phrase that once came from a parent now comes from within. "Don't make a scene." Over time, the voice of caution becomes indistinguishable from the voice of truth. The echo becomes the editor, shaping every sentence before it's spoken. The echo chamber within shame thrives in repetition. It is the emotion of exposure, of being seen as lacking, and it often hides behind the pretext of self-improvement. "I just want to do better," we say, unaware that the grammar of our striving is the grammar of punishment. In environments steeped in performance, schools, workplaces, and even families, the language of worth often defaults to evaluation. Good job is as conditional as do better. Both frame existence as an achievement. Eventually, the self is measured not by being, but by doing. Online, this pattern amplifies. Algorithms reward outrage and certainty, punishing nuance and hesitation. The nervous system, seeking belonging, mirrors dominant tones, sarcasm, dismissal, and perfectionism. Social media becomes a linguistic feedback loop, an external inner critic echoing the internal one. Words like cringe, delusional, or copium have become shorthand for shaming difference. Each phrase compresses complexity into caricature. The more we use them, the narrower our empathy becomes. This digital dialect of derision reinforces internal scripts of doubt. Even when directed outward, these words reflect inward, reminding us of the standards we fear we cannot meet. The more we ridicule others for imperfection, the more we conceal our own. The inner critic recruits us as its emissary. Mirror linguistic hypothesis. Shame as reflection, according to the mirror linguistic hypothesis. Meaning emerges through relational reflection. Every utterance reveals not only information but intention. When shame becomes internalized, our speech reflects not truth but trauma. We project the grammar of our upbringing onto the world, expecting others to grade our existence the way authority once did. Phrases like, I can't mess this up, they'll think I'm stupid, are less about others' judgment than about the residue of old hierarchies. The voice we fear is not in the room, it's in the mirror. Through MLH, we recognize that language is a feedback system. Every statement both expresses and reinforces a state. Speaking from shame perpetuates shame. Speaking from regulation invites repair. To shift our self-narration, we must change not only the content of our thoughts, but the syntax of safety in which they are spoken. This is why affirmations alone often fail. Saying I am enough in a body still braced for correction can feel hollow, even false. The phrase must be paired with physiological permission, breath, warmth, and self-contact, so the body can believe the words it hears. Healing, then, is less about reciting new scripts than resounding them, embedding them in state, not just speech. Rewriting the script, practice in awareness. Before we can rewrite the story, we must recognize its grammar. Begin by listening to your own narration. Catch the familiar phrasing. Do you use should when you mean could? Do you say always or never when you feel powerless? Do you measure worth in enoughs? Each of these words signals a boundary not of logic but of love. They reveal where conditional acceptance has colonized expression. A simple self-linguistic audit can help. 1. For one day, record phrases you say about yourself, aloud or in thought. 2. Circle every should, never, and enough. 3. Rewrite each with curiosity instead of condemnation. I should have known becomes I didn't know yet. I'll never get this right becomes I'm learning a new way. I'm not enough becomes I'm growing at my own pace. This is not semantic trickery, it's neuro-linguistic retraining. Each reframe builds a new pathway, teaching the nervous system that correction need not equal shame. Over time, the inner critic softens, not because it is silenced, but because it is translated. Its voice becomes less an accuser and more an archivist, a reminder of what once kept you safe. Reflection prompt. Hearing the echo, ask yourself, which phrases still narrate my self-doubt? Whose voice do they resemble? What emotion follows when they appear? Fear, guilt, or sadness? What tone would feel truer if I spoke to myself now? Awareness is authorship. To change the story, we must decode its grammar. Shame is a language learned under duress, but fluency is not destiny. You can choose a new syntax, one where curiosity replaces correction and worth is not negotiated through performance. Because every sentence you speak to yourself either reopens the wound or rehearses the healing. And healing, like language, is learned in repetition. The somatic archive, how words become states, the body as the keeper of language. Every conversation you've ever had still lives somewhere inside you, not as sentences or sound waves, but as states, subtle tensions, reflexes, sensations, and instincts that linger long after the words have faded. The body, more faithful than memory, carries the archive of how you were spoken to. It keeps the record in muscle and fascia, in heart rhythm and breath tempo, in how quickly you brace when someone raises their voice. The past doesn't echo in words, it reverberates in reactions. We tend to think of language as a cognitive act, a string of words processed by thought, but speech first passes through the nervous system. The limbic system doesn't care about grammar, it cares about safety. Before your mind has passed a sentence, your body has already classified it. Threat, comfort, invitation, or withdrawal. A sharp word we mean when we say words live in us, it's not poetic, it's anatomical. The muscles remember what the mind minimized, mirror neurons and emotional contagion. The discovery of mirror neurons in the 1990s, Rizzolatti et al., revolutionized our understanding of empathy. These neurons fire both when performing an action and when observing it, effectively allowing us to simulate others' experiences. In communication, this means we don't just hear words, we feel them. When someone speaks in anger, your mirror system partially reproduces their physiology, including an elevated heart rate, shallow breath. The same occurs with tenderness. Calm tones cue parasympathetic resonance. Language, then, is a form of empathic transmission. The state of the speaker becomes the state of the listener, especially when emotional bonds or authority hierarchies amplify influence. This mechanism underpins NSL, nervous system language. Every exchange is a biophysical duet. If one voice carries tension, both bodies tune to it unless one person remains consciously regulated. This is why awareness of one's own baseline state is crucial. Without it, we become echo chambers of others' unprocessed emotions, repeating the very patterns we seek to escape. From an MLH mirror linguistic hypothesis view, the words we hear are not static signs, but reflective stimuli. They show us where our body still carries someone else's voice. Healing means learning to differentiate resonance from recognition, to ask, is this mine, or is this memory? Digital echoes, the body online. In the digital age, language travels faster than nervous systems can filter. We scroll through hundreds of micro-interactions, headlines, comments, slogans, each carrying tonal charge. Though silent, they still speak in state. A single sentence on a screen can contract your diaphragm or quicken your pulse. Written language has its own prosody. Punctuation, spacing, capitalization, and even emojis act as cues. What reads as an alarm? What implies hesitation or judgment? The brain, wired for inference, supplies missing tone through projection. Online communication thus engages the same neural circuits as spoken conversation. The mirror system still fires, interpreting implied emotion. Propaganda exploits this. Repetition of charged phrases, crisis, threat, traitor, terrorist, far left, far right primes the amygdala for vigilance. Emotional contagion spreads through timelines, synchronizing arousal across populations. Over time, exposure creates baseline dysregulation, a chronic readiness for outrage, fear, or certainty. From an NSL standpoint, digital ecosystems often function as unconscious co-regulators, except that instead of safety, they stabilize through shared alarm. When everyone around you is tense, tension feels like truth. This is why stepping away from screens can feel like withdrawal. The nervous system has adapted to dysregulation as normalcy. Recognizing this allows for conscious repatterning. Each time you pause before replying, scroll past provocation, or breathe before believing, you're interrupting the somatic script. You're teaching your body that not every word requires reaction. The science of state encoding implicit memory, the unconscious storage of sensory emotional pattern, forms primarily through the amygdala hippocampal network. Unlike explicit memory, which records facts and narratives, implicit memory preserves feeling states. It's why you might recall the anxiety of a childhood scolding without remembering the exact words. Studies in affective neuroscience show that emotionally charged experiences produce heightened cortisol and adrenaline, strengthening synaptic connections in the amygdala. This makes threat-linked memories more durable than neutral ones, a survival mechanism that unfortunately privileges pain. Language delivered under stress thus gains disproportionate influence. A single insult in a moment of vulnerability can overshadow dozens of affirmations. The nervous system prioritizes what might prevent future harm. This asymmetry explains why praise often fades while criticism lingers, not due to pessimism, but biology. Over time, these stored responses form state templates, preset configurations of physiology, attention, and emotion. Each template corresponds to a class of words or tones. For example, disappointing might activate a freeze template, failure a fight template, always a fawn template seeking repair. Recognizing which template activates is the first step to state literacy, the ability to name and navigate one's own somatic responses. Reclaiming the archive awareness alone does not erase the archive, but it begins to reindex it. Each moment of mindful noticing, my chest tightens when I hear that phrase, updates the entry. You're no longer the passive storage, you're the archivist. To repattern stored states, pair awareness with safety. When an old phrase triggers contraction, pause. Place a hand where you feel the echo, chest, gut, throat, breathe into it. Then gently rename the experience. This is a memory of vigilance, not a verdict on me. By labeling the state, you recruit the prefrontal cortex, integrating sensation with story. This top-down regulation gradually weakens the amygdala's automatic grip. Over time, the body learns that recognition does not require reenactment. You can also introduce counterphrases, not forced affirmations, but embodied responses. If your too much arises, exhale and say, my presence is allowed. If you never learn echoes, reply, I'm still evolving. The key is sincerity. The body recognizes truth, not performance. Each reframe rewrites a footnote in the archive, shifting association from threat to trust. Healing, in this sense, is linguistic editing performed through physiology. Reflection. Reading your body's dictionary to understand your somatic archive. Approach your body as a library rather than a battlefield. Each reaction is a reference, not a rebellion. Begin to ask, which phrases make my body contract or hold breath? Where do I feel old reprimands? Which compliments feel uncomfortable and why? What written words online trigger immediate tension? Map these sensations with curiosity. You're learning the geography of meaning, the topography of how language lives in you. Because before healing can rewrite the story, awareness must locate the shelf. The archive is not your enemy, it's your evidence, proof of how faithfully your body has listened. The mirror of meaning now, that we've uncovered where words live, we turn to how they speak. The body may remember, but memory alone cannot restore coherence. To transform these residues into resonance, we must learn to decode and retranslate the messages they carry. Next, in Element 4, Mirror Linguistic Decode, What Correction Teaches the Soul, we'll examine how language shapes philosophy, how phrases once meant for guidance became doctrines of worth, and how retranslation can turn injury into insight. Psychological insight. The echo chamber of identity, how internalized language constructs the self. Most people believe identity is discovered, a hidden truth waiting to be unearthed. But in truth, much of who we think we are has been taught to us, phrased into existence through repetition. We inherit a script long before we ever improvise our own. Every phrase spoken in our direction, especially in formative years, becomes a thread in the tapestry of selfhood. Over time, these threads weave into patterns, familiar, but not always faithful to who we really are. We live inside a linguistic echo chamber, a world where our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are reinforced by the very language that first shaped them. This is not metaphorical, it's neurological. The words we hear most often become synaptic shortcuts, carved grooves in the brain that make certain beliefs feel natural. When we hear them echoed from others, from the media, from our own minds, we interpret familiarity as truth. And so, the echo becomes identity. This process can be traced through observational learning, attachment patterns, and linguistic conditioning, each reinforcing the self-image transmitted through early relationships. Albert Bandura's social learning theory describes how modeling, not just seeing behavior, but hearing language, builds internal schemas of what is acceptable, valuable, or lovable. When a parent says, "You're such a good helper," the child's self-schema fuses worth with service. When they hear, "You're too loud," or "You never listen," the self compresses around compliance. Repeated often enough, these phrases cease to be feedback, they become facts. In attachment theory, John Bowlby emphasized that safety and selfhood are co-authored. A secure tone builds a secure self. When care is conveyed through warmth, patience, and attunement, the child's nervous system encodes the world as responsive and the self as worthy. When language is cold, inconsistent, or punitive, it imprints uncertainty. Am I too much, too little? And the child learns to translate love through vigilance. The nervous system becomes bilingual in affection and anxiety. Our internal monologue, therefore, is less an original voice and more an archive of attunement. We speak to ourselves the way we were once spoken to. The mirror linguistic hypothesis frames this as reflexive translation. The earliest mirrors, caregivers, teachers, and peers not only reflected who we were, but also how we were allowed to sound. Each word absorbed in those years carried with it a nervous system state, warmth, fear, pride, or shame, and these became the building blocks of our self-speech. This explains why many people can articulate self-compassion intellectually, yet still feel tense or fraudulent when they try to practice it. The body does not yet trust the tone. In nervous system language, the voice we use toward ourselves either regulates or dysregulates. A kind sentence delivered in a critical cadence will still constrict the breath. Safety is not declared. It is demonstrated through rhythm, softness, and pause. Repetition as identity formation. Albert Bandura's research on modeling and reinforcement suggests that repetition not only teaches behavior, it encodes identity. The child who repeatedly hears, "You're such a troublemaker," begins to seek coherence with that identity. Even when they try to change, they may unconsciously recreate scenarios that reaffirm it, because the nervous system prefers the predictable to the unknown. In other words, familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Cognitive psychology frames this through schema theory, mental templates that filter experience. Once a schema is established, I'm difficult, I'm a disappointment, I must earn love, new data is interpreted through that lens. Compliments are dismissed. They don't really mean it. Criticism is amplified. See, there it is again. And opportunities for repair are sabotaged. I'll just mess it up anyway. The schema isn't merely a belief. It's a linguistic filter woven into perception. Lacan offered a parallel insight through psychoanalysis. The unconscious is structured like a language, meaning our deepest drives and defenses speak in the grammar we were given. The words we absorbed become the scaffolding of our unconscious scripts. Even dreams, which seem abstract, borrow symbols from the same early lexicon. To rewrite identity, then, one must learn a new syntax of self. Not only thinking differently, but speaking differently, translating old phrases into nervous system safety. Because every wound, once named, becomes a word we can reclaim. Integration practice. Rewriting the echo, turning old phrases into new pathways. Insight without integration becomes another echo, an idea we understand, but can't yet feel. Awareness opens the door, but repetition changes the room. The voice inside us will not update its language because we demand it. It will change because we demonstrate safety through consistent translation. This is the heart of integration, rewriting not just what we say, but how our body learns to believe it. Earlier, we traced how words become identity. Now, we begin the work of reauthoring those words, not by denying their history, but by reframing their message. In nervous system language, reframing is not mere semantics, it's state repair. When we transform a phrase, we are not performing affirmation. We are sending a new signal to the body, offering a physiological experience of truth. Think of each reframe as a nervous system bridge, a phrase strong enough to carry both memory and possibility. The goal isn't to erase the wound, but to translate it into safety. Step 1. Identify. Begin by locating a phrase that still contracts your breath or tightens your chest. It might be one you still hear in moments of stress, or a quiet mantra that surfaces when you fall short. Common examples include, "You're too sensitive," "Stop crying," "You'll never change," "You should have known better," "You're impossible." Notice the tone that comes with each phrase. Words never arrive alone, they carry rhythm, pitch, and memory. Ask where you feel the echo: jaw, stomach, or shoulders. Awareness of location is the first act of authorship. You cannot rewrite what you cannot find. Step 2. Decode next. Decode what the phrase tried to teach. Most wounding language began as a misguided form of regulation, a nervous system trying to restore order without the vocabulary for care. "Stop crying" was often a plea for calm, not cruelty. "You're too sensitive" may have been the projection of someone overwhelmed by their own emotion. Understanding origin is not excusing impact, it's recovering the original need behind the wound. When you decode, you shift from shame to sense-making. The body begins to see that pain once served a purpose, and therefore it can be repurposed. Step 3. Rephrase now. Offer a translation that preserves the wisdom but removes the wound. The goal is not positive spin, but physiological truth. Your reframe should feel believable, not performative. Speak each slowly, aloud, and notice the body's reaction. A reframe is effective when it elicits breath, warmth, or relief. Examples: "You're too sensitive," rephrase to "Your sensitivity is intelligence. You notice what others miss." "Stop crying," rephrase to "Tears mean truth is close. Let them speak." "You'll never change," rephrase to "Growth is my nature. Every breath rewrites me." "You should have known better," rephrase to "I was learning. Now I understand more." "You're impossible," rephrase to "My depth deserves patience, even from me." Each translation acts as a neural rewire. According to research on neuroplasticity, repetition strengthens pathways. What we practice linguistically becomes structurally encoded. The more we repeat safe phrases, the more fluently the body learns calm. The mirror method: for deeper integration, pair language with reflection, literally. Speak your rephrased sentence while looking into a mirror. At first, the words may feel foreign, as if addressed to someone else. That's normal. You're teaching your nervous system to see itself through a new lens, one of compassion rather than correction. Over time, the gaze and phrase sync, bridging dissociation between voice and self-image. If mirrors feel confronting, record your voice and listen back gently. Hearing kindness in your own tone begins to dissolve distrust. The voice you once used for survival can now become the voice of sanctuary. The living lexicon integration isn't a one-time exercise. It's a practice of authorship. Create what we call a living lexicon, a personal journal of phrases that soothe, stabilize, and strengthen. Add to it over time. Write the reframes that feel real, not ideal. Let them evolve as you do. For example, "I'm behind" might become "I'm in rhythm with my season." "I ruined everything" could soften into "I made an impact I can still repair." "I don't belong" may grow into "I'm learning where resonance lives." This lexicon becomes your internal compass, a repository of safety you can return to when echoes grow loud. It isn't about memorizing mantras, it's about remembering meaning. Journaling cue: take one wounding phrase from your past. 1. Write it down exactly as you heard it. 2. Note what it tried to teach: control, silence, perfection, protection. 3. Translate it into a language your nervous system can trust. 4. Speak it aloud slowly. Pause after each word. 5. Notice what shifts: heart rate, breath, muscle tone. Write what you feel, not just what you think. Integration is sensed before it's understood. Why repetition matters: repetition is not redundancy, it's repair. The neural circuits wired by early repetition require new cycles to update. This is why intellectual insight alone doesn't heal. The body learns through rhythm, not revelation. Speak your reframed phrases daily, not to convince yourself, but to condition trust. Each repetition is a message. Safety is the new standard. Reflection prompt: ask yourself, which phrases still echo when I make a mistake? What tone does my body expect when I fail? How does it feel when I hear kindness, suspicion, or safety? Write your answers honestly. Awareness builds the bridge, practice strengthens it. As you continue building your living lexicon, remember, healing is more about consistency than complexity. Small sentences, repeated with sincerity, become new states of being. Yet words alone are not enough. Tone and silence complete the translation. Next, in Element 6, Embodied Resonance, Healing through Sound and Silence, we'll explore how to pair your new language with sound, breath, and stillness so the body too learns the vocabulary of safety. Embodied Resonance, Healing through Sound and Silence. When the body learns to listen, language begins before words. The first sound the nervous system ever knew was rhythm, heartbeat, breath. the rise and fall of a voice that promised, "You're not alone." Long before we could speak, we listened. And even now, the body continues to hear what the mind forgets. Tone, pitch, breath, and pause all carry messages older than syntax. To truly heal word wounds, we must let body join the conversation. In nervous system language, every phrase is a signal, but tone is the transmission. A sentence spoken kindly but hurried can still trigger vigilance. A pause held softly can do more than 1,000 reassurances. Sound, more than speech, tells the body whether it is safe to receive the message. Silence, more than absence, tells it when it's safe to rest. The physiology of resonance. When we speak with warmth, the ventral vagal pathway activates, the branch of the nervous system that regulates calm connection and social engagement. Research in polyvagal theory shows that tone, particularly low, melodic prosody, cues the brainstem that safety is present. The throat softens, breath slows, and muscles release their guard. The body recognizes not just what is said, but how it is said. Equally, harsh tone, clipped rhythm, or rising pitch can signal threat, regardless of intent. The nervous system does not interpret grammar, it reads vibration. This is why we can feel unsettled by a text message that says "okay." Tone isn't carried, so the body fills in the blanks with its own history. Our physiology craves coherence between word and waveform. When language and sound align, trust is restored. This is embodied resonance, the alignment of semantic meaning with sensory safety. Healing language lives not just in thought, but in the hum beneath it. Sound as self-regulation. The voice is both messenger and medicine. When spoken slowly and sincerely, it can regulate the very system that produces it. This is called biofeedback through tone, using vocal vibration to influence internal state. Singing, humming, chanting, or even whispering can stimulate the vagus nerve, grounding the body in presence. You don't need to perform. Speak softly, from the chest rather than the throat. Let the exhale carry more air than the inhale. Feel the vibration in your sternum, a resonance chamber reminding you, "I'm here, I'm whole, I'm safe." A simple practice. 1. Place one hand on your chest, one on your throat. 2. Inhale through the nose, slowly. 3. Exhale on a hum, letting the sound vibrate under your palm. 4. Repeat a phrase from your living lexicon, such as, "I'm safe enough to slow down. My voice belongs here." Don't rush to finish. Let the sound linger. The nervous system learns safety through duration. How long softness lasts before silence returns. Silence as integration. Silence is not the absence of healing. It's the space where healing lands. In a world saturated with noise, silence often feels like a void, but to the nervous system, it's evidence of peace. After every spoken reframe, leave a pause. Notice what happens in that stillness. A swallow, a sigh, a loosening around the eyes. That is comprehension without cognition, the body registering a new reality. You might feel discomfort at first. Silence can awaken echoes, unprocessed words rising to be heard. Stay present. Let each arise and fade like ripples after a sound. Integration happens when the system is given enough quiet to reorganize. Practice the quiet breath. Sit comfortably. Take a slow inhale, count to 4, exhale to 6. After exhaling, remain in silence for 2 beats before inhaling again. In the gap, simply notice. This micro-stillness teaches the body that safety includes stillness, not just speech. Resonance beyond voice. In earlier episodes, we discussed how tone can be transmitted even through text. Online communication, though silent, still carries vibration through rhythm, punctuation, and phrasing. The words we read evoke chemical and emotional responses. A single harsh comment can trigger cortisol. A gentle affirmation can soften tension. This reinforces a key hypothesis of NSL and MLH. Language is energetic. Whether vocalized or written, it modulates the nervous system through pattern and perception. When we read messages aloud or imagine their tone, mirror neurons activate, simulating sound within the brain. Even in silence, resonance persists. To practice awareness online, before sending a message, ask, "Does this word open or close the body?" When reading something charged, pause and exhale. Feel the body's first response, tightness, heat, release. This is your nervous system's literacy, learning to read beyond letters. Creating a sonic sanctuary healing word wounds isn't only about avoiding harshness, it's about cultivating harmony. Surround yourself with tones that teach safety. Slow music, nature sounds, gentle conversation. The body entrains to rhythm. Auditory environments become emotional baselines. Consider beginning or ending the day with a sound that mirrors how you wish to feel. Spacious, steady, sincere. Likewise, notice how your own environment shapes your speech. Rooms with hard surfaces invite sharper tones. Quiet spaces soften delivery. Adjust lighting, posture, or distance if needed. The voice changes when the body feels held. Integrating through daily ritual. Try. Setting aside 2 minutes a day for resonant reflection. Speak one phrase from your living lexicon. Follow it with a hum, letting vibration fill the space. Sit in silence for 10 seconds, breathing slowly. Close with gratitude. Thank you, body, for listening. Small rituals done consistently shift baseline state. Over time, you'll notice the body anticipating calm, just as it once anticipated criticism. This is how resonance rewires reflection prompt. Ask yourself, what tone feels like safety in my body? Do I pause enough to let kindness settle? How does silence speak to me, as peace or punishment? Write what arises. Listen between sentences. The nervous system often answers in sensations before words. Sound and silence are languages older than thought. When we learn to use them consciously, we return to the original communication of safety, rhythm, breath, and presence. The wound that entered through vibration can be healed through vibration. Next, in Element 7, Closing Whisper. From scar to script, we'll trace how your story evolves from injury to authorship, turning each echo into a line of your living language, a script written not in shame but in self-trust. Closing Whisper. From scar to script, the language we learn after the wound. Every wound carries a word. Every word leaves a trace. Some live on the surface, quick to fade. Others settle deep, fusing with the architecture of the self. Yet healing is not the erasure of injury, it is the integration of its message. To rewrite a wound is to translate pain into wisdom, not to deny what was said, but to choose how it continues to speak through you. When we began this episode, we traced how language can cut as deeply as any blade, how tone, phrase, or silence can shape our nervous system's sense of safety. We explored how repetition builds identity, how echoes become inner narration, and how words can be rewritten into signals of trust. Now, as we reach the quiet close, we gather from awareness to reframe. Once awareness arrives, language must evolve. Insight alone can't soothe the body, only new phrasing, paired with presence, can. This is where reframing becomes authorship, not mere optimism, but accurate translation. You are not rewriting history. You are writing the sequel, one in which your nervous system participates in the editing. Consider again some of the reframes we practiced. You're too sensitive. Reframes to, my sensitivity is intelligence. Stop crying, leads to tears mean truth is close. You'll never change, reframes as example as growth is my nature. Each one transforms criticism into capacity. The wound remains visible, but now it carries context. The echo no longer dictates, it dialogue, and in that exchange you reclaim choice. How to respond, what to believe, where to breathe. Reframing is not pretending, it's perceiving with precision. You're training your inner translator to read tone, state, and intention accurately, not reactively. Over time, these translations accumulate, forming a lexicon of safety that reshapes identity from the inside out. From reframe to resonance, language heals when it's felt, not just spoken. Repetition builds recognition. Resonance builds trust. Each time you speak a kind phrase aloud, slowly, sincerely, your body learns a new melody. At first it may resist, flinching at frequencies it's not accustomed to. That resistance is not failure, it's evidence of retuning. Just as scar tissue thickens before softening, self-compassion often feels awkward before it feels authentic. The goal is not immediate comfort, but gradual coherence, a nervous system learning that kindness is not a trick, but a truth. Sound and silence both serve this repatterning. The hum of your voice, the rhythm of your breath, and the pause that follows. Together they create a symphony of safety. Healing doesn't demand endless speech, it asks for congruence. Every sigh, swallow, or soft exhale becomes punctuation, proof that the new language has landed. From resonance to rewrite eventually, the wound ceases to speak in defense. It begins to narrate wisdom. You find yourself responding to old triggers with new phrases, not because you memorized them, but because your nervous system now speaks fluently in calm. This is the rewrite, when healing stops being a task and starts being a tone. A rewritten word is not sterile, it carries depth, empathy, and choice. Where shame once tightened syntax, self-trust introduces nuance. Where the body once braced for rejection, it now breathes through uncertainty. You no longer need to silence echoes, you harmonize them. The critic becomes counsel, the scar becomes script. In MLH, this marks the transition from mirror as memory to mirror as mastery, the ability to reflect reality consciously rather than unconsciously repeat it. In NSL, this is linguistic regulation, each phrase reinforcing the physiology of safety. Integrative reflection. Before we close, pause and reflect. Which phrases have softened since the beginning of this episode? What tone feels truer now than when we began? If your younger self could hear you speak today, what would they recognize? Write one sentence you no longer believe, and one that replaced it. Speak them aloud, slowly, feel the difference. That shift in breath, in resonance, is healing made audible. Remember, every word you survive can become one you live by. Yet even as we reclaim our voice, many of us still carry unspoken sentences, truths withheld for safety, needs deferred for peace, opinions swallowed to keep belonging. Silence, too, is a language, one often written in fear. In our next episode, The Script of Silence, we'll explore the quieter dimensions of communication, how people-pleasing, suppression, and strategic stillness shape our nervous system. We'll ask, when is silence wise and when is it wound? How do we find the voice that can speak without bracing? And the pause that reflects presence rather than repression? We'll decode the grammar of avoidance, learn the difference between listening and disappearing, and begin to write a new script, one where voice and stillness coexist as equals. Because healing isn't always loud, sometimes it whispers. Thank you for walking with me through this reflection, for listening not only with your mind, but with your body. Every time you pause, breathe, and notice how a word feels, you're practicing authorship. Mirror talk is not about perfect language, it's about conscious language. Words that serve regulation rather than reaction, speech that invites connection rather than control. These episodes aren't lessons to memorize, but mirrors to inhabit, each one helping you recognize that language is lived, not learned. As you leave this space, take one phrase from today that felt real, write it down, speak it once more softly, let your tone be the teacher. Over time, these sentences will stop sounding like scripts and start sounding like you. You don't need to erase what was said, you only need to decide what continues to echo. In our next conversation, we'll explore the script of silence, where withheld truths and quiet defenses learn to speak again. Until then, hold space for stillness. Let silence become part of your language. You've been listening to Mirror Talk, the language of the nervous system. I'm James Miller.